You're listening to If Only I Were Wiser podcast, where Raina Wilson brings together wisdom and raw life stories to provide encouragement and truth. So many times it's easy to become discouraged in your own pursuit of health because your story or circumstances look drastically different from your favorite influencer or even the expectations you had for yourself. If that is you, welcome! This space is for you to learn, breathe, and maybe just listen and see what wellness could look like for you. Hey friends, welcome back to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast. On today's episode, I have special guest Natosha Ash. Natosha is a dedicated and passionate health and wellness advocate with a unique background in genetics and genomics, naturopathic medicine, and nutrigenomics. As someone who understands the importance of using science and nature to promote optimal health, Natosha has made it her life's work to share her knowledge with others. Her mastery in genetics and genomics allows her to look at health and wellness from a unique angle, and she leverages this knowledge to promote positive lifestyle changes in others. In this episode, Natosha shares her own story with systematic racism on the road to practicing within the Western medicine sphere, as well as the discrepancies in healthcare for women and especially people of color. I am so thankful for Natosha's authenticity and vulnerability for this episode, so let's dive in. Hello, Natosha. Thank you so much for joining me on the If Only I Were Wiser podcast. I am so excited for this conversation.
Me too.
So, Natosha, can you just start by sharing a little bit about who you are? What does life look like for you on a regular basis? What brings you joy? All the things.
So my name is Natosha. I was born and raised in North Carolina, Hendersonville, North Carolina, which whenever I say Hendersonville, people are like, where's that? I'm like, Asheville. They're like, I know where you're from. Asheville. Okay. So I grew up there, very small town. I went to Hendersonville High School there, and I just knew that I wanted to be a lawyer when I got older. I was like, my mom was like, you like to argue, you need to be some type of attorney. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'll do that. So I did mock trial in high school. I ended up getting to meet like a lot of Supreme Court justices, and I was like, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. So in college, I majored in political science at first, and then I changed it to pre-law, which, you know, looking back at that, I'm like, maybe I should have kept political science. But I had a really great advisor, so she really helped me out a lot. And so I was studying for the LSAT, and my mom ended up having to have an emergency open heart surgery. She had congestive heart failure.
Wow.
And so my sister called me and she was like, our Ma, she died on the table. She died on the table. And like my heart stopped. I was in the,
What?
and I was in the dorm room and I was like, oh my gosh, I ran to the bathroom crying. And like, diabetes has been like a plague in my family, but my mom, she smoked a lot. And so at that very moment, I knew that law is what I wanted to do. But then I also started getting into like, you know, the conspiracy side of things, big pharmas and all of that. I was in that stage of my life. And I was like, I need to find a way to help her naturally. Same with my dad, same with my aunts and uncles. And so I decided to just start looking at herbal programs and start teaching myself herbal medicine. So for a very long time, I was reading a lot of books. Like people thought I was in school. They were like, where do you go to school? Like you know so much about this.
Yeah. How are you studying this?
And I'm like, to be honest with you, I was getting ready to go into law school. Like, this is new to me too. And so I felt so convicted to help people naturally. And so when I found out that naturopathic medicine existed, I was like, I have to go to the school. And it wasn't one in North Carolina. So I was like, I have to move across the state. So I ended up moving to Illinois, and I started a naturopathic medical school there once I got accepted. I was working for the state government at the time that I got accepted. So yeah,
that's crazy.
I was really happy where I was at. I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it was a radical change for me because I moved to Illinois, like in the middle of nowhere, and the first year of medical school was very depressing for me. So I feel like I lost myself in that first year, but that's how I got into naturopathic medical school. Later in the year, I started getting into genetics, and I was like, I really like genetics, like nutrigenomics. I started teaching myself a lot of that, doing certifications. And then I started a master's program in genetics.
Dang, girl.
And so I'll be finished with that this year in September. And so that's how I got started in genetics. And then I had always had like a love for like chemistry. So before...
Okay. Yuck. Can't share that with you. Nope.
Yeah. It
can't do it. My high school chemistry teacher just kind of
ruined it.
Killed everybody. Yeah.
I think it definitely does depend on the teacher, because we had a medical school professor. His name was Dr. McCrae, and I will never forget this man. He is so brilliant, and he brought back my love for biochemistry. And you just got to have the right professor. And so I got back into formulating skincare. And so that's kind of like how I started my own skincare line, because I had took cosmetic chemistry courses. And so that's the skincare aspect. And so, yeah.
That's crazy. So are you just trying to tough it through school right now? Or?
Yep, finishing school up.
Oh, man. So how long have you been in school?
So for the master's program, I stopped. I did a brief pause on that when I got into medical school, and I was like, I don't know if I can finish this, together.
Yeah.
Especially with like the 26, 27 credits that they were requiring. So I started medical school in 2019, like 2020, like around that time. I want to say it was around that time. But then I transferred. So now I'm in Arizona, and I transferred to SCNM, and that, the whole conversation about SCNM is a whole new story. But my prospective graduation date is next year.
Wow, that's so exciting. Are you excited to be done, or are you going to miss kind of some aspect of, like you said, like the learning, being in it kind of phase?
I'm more so excited to be done. Just naturopathic medicine for me, it was supposed to be something that was inviting, and something that felt natural, but it changed a lot when I came here, which is kind of why I changed schools. And the ideas and the philosophy, it just didn't match up with the school here in Arizona. And so I ended up leaving that school. And I could go on and on, but I would say with school at this point in my life, I'm happy to be done with something, because I feel like I've given so much of my life to school.
Right. Yeah, that's totally fair. What do you think will be next for you after graduation?
That is a good question. I wanted to start research in cancer genetics. Cancer is like one of the... I knew that in school I wanted to specialize in oncology, and then just combining the genetic aspect of it. I knew I wanted to do some type of research. Like, cancer is just so interesting to me.
That's crazy. I'm so excited for you. But that sounds so awesome.
Thank you.
Chemistry killed me in high school, so we just about stopped there.
Yeah, it's every time. I know, like, they had this, it was like this TikTok trend where they would go around and ask like chemistry majors, what did you make on this test? What did you make on this test? And then everybody would be like, oh, I got a 69. Oh, I got a 59. Oh, I got a 49. And I'm like, what is going on? Why are the grades so low?
Yeah.
But yeah.
And now it makes sense,
it's tough, right? Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, it does make sense. It's foundational.
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited for you. That sounds really awesome. I definitely was the nerd in school, but it just wasn't lined up for us to continue school. But that's so awesome for you. I'm really excited about that.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad that it's a long time coming and you can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel to officially be done.
Yeah.
So as we dive into this conversation, I'm really excited just to dive into this topic, as I'm sure I'm just curious to see like what your experience has been, even in just like learning more, like you said, about big pharma. Like, diving headfirst into the medical world from, from genetics to oncology to pursuing your passions like outside of school. And I'll definitely just preface this conversation by saying like, I definitely came in with some insecurity because like my experiences will be totally different from yours. Like I even had the conversation with my friend the other day, was like, in these like ethnic or racial conversations, especially for women of minorities, it's so nuanced because I remember being early middle school and early high school to look at friends and being like, oh, well, I'm too brown because I identify as Hispanic, but I'm too brown for my white friends, but I'm too white for my brown friends. So it's like, I'm still navigating my own ethnic identity. So I'm super curious as to like what that has looked like for you. So to start off, do you have any experiences or places where you felt, even walking into medicine and like learning in this world, that you felt like you didn't belong or you felt like you were treated differently?
Oh, this is a really great question. Yes. So, and I'm actually glad we're talking about this because, I would say last year was probably one of the hardest years of my life because I had to make the decision to walk away from a school because of what we're discussing here, like my identity, my racial identity, me as a Black woman. And it hurt so bad because I'm like, I invested so much time and I invested the moving just to get here and it be this. So when I first told my friends that I was transferring to a school in Arizona, the very first thing they were like, do you know the diversity there? Like, what's we looked it up. It's 6% Black. And I was like, that doesn't seem too bad. And they're like, yeah, that's bad. And so I'm like, okay. And so I started trying to reach and contact other students in the school and, get their experience of the school. And I kept coming back to the same thing about the school of Black women in medicine having to record when they take their practicals. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound right. And I'm like, why are Black women having to go into a medical profession and arm themselves with a recording device to make sure that they are graded fairly? So when I got here and I started going through the program, I started seeing a lot of that pop up in the way that I was spoken to by deans and staff members. And I tried not to take it personal, but there were so many experiences that aligned with my white counterparts that just showed that my experience was going to be different as a Black woman. And so I've heard so many things, whereas like Black women shouldn't be in naturopathic medicine. This is supposed to be a white field. This field
like
was
blatant, like people speaking this over you.
High power up people telling students this program was made for single white women, and you have to have an advocate in the program as a Black student. And that is what made me the most disgusted with the program.
Right. Yeah.
And so medical school is already tough and it's already stressful. And just to go through that stress of discrimination and the stress of medical school, it breaks you down. So I did have to make the decision to leave that particular school because of the racial conversation, how it kept coming up. And it kind of made me feel inadequate in a way because I'm like, why are we still in 2022, 2023, where we look at Black women or Black men as inferior in medicine? And you see it come up all around you. I have so many peers where they say they walk into the patient's room and the patient's like, well, that's surprising. I have a Black doctor. That's surprising. Or can I get another doctor? And so as a medical student, I'm going into this and I'm like, what are people going to think of me as a Black woman trying to be a physician? And I see it now. And so It's definitely hard trying to navigate that where you feel like you don't belong.
Definitely. And some of your peers, like you said, shared the same sentiment.
The same sentiment.
So what was the response when you guys brought this up and you're like addressing this in real time?
A lot of people are afraid of retaliation. And so I've actually experienced retaliation from the moment I stepped on that campus. And I have a voice, and when wrong is wrong and right is right, I want to speak on it. And so
yeah, if you'd be open to sharing that.
Yeah. When I noticed what was going on and I started to advocate for myself, I started to see a lot of retaliation. I actually got cited with insubordination. And yep, I got cited with insubordination. And I will never forget this one student. She said, "If you're a Black student here, you keep your head down." And so I remember that. And then I remember the conversations that we had when we actually got an advocate for the school who has since resigned. And
oh, wow.
And they basically tie our hands behind our back. And so a lot of students a lot of Black students or students of color feel as though they just have to keep their head down and they have to keep going through this program because they've already invested so much money, and they don't want to be retaliated against. They don't want to go into clinic and be on shift with someone who's like, "Oh, well, this is the person that was advocating for herself," or she likes to call things out. They don't want that.
Right.
And so that's been the biggest pushback is the retaliation. So most people don't speak out.
So what was it like for your own heart to be able to get to the point where you're like, I can't be here anymore?
It was definitely, it took a lot for me to decide that. But mentally I was already gone. I would say the very first quarter I had ran for president. I lost by like 2 points. And then the next quarter, everyone wanted me to be president. But at my first quarter there, I was already experiencing this. And I'm like, if I'm put in a position of quote unquote power, it's going to be worse for me, or I'm probably not even going to stay there long. And so by my fourth quarter, I was already mentally gone from the school. I was making my exit plan in my fourth quarter. And when I made that decision, I was having a conversation with my mentor, and she was like, think about what you want to do and then decide if you need to be at this program to do it. And when she said that, it light bulbs went off, because I cried for like 3 or 4 days straight, because I'm like, why do I have to keep experiencing this where I go? And I know it's not because I'm inadequate. I know it's not because I don't know the material, and it's simply because of my skin color. And for me, and I feel like that was the best thing to do. And then when I left, I can't even explain it. Like I always tell people, if you stay in a place where you're not supposed to be, God cannot bless you. You close so many other doors and you can't be blessed. And so I felt like when I walked out that door and I closed it and I didn't look back, so many things opened up, Raina. I even think about it now, like I have chills, because I'm like, was this what I needed to do to get to where I needed to be? And it hurt me in the process. And I thought that my world was ending, but then leaving made things a lot better than what they were. And so now when I see my friends, they're like, "Oh, you're glowing. You look so relaxed." I'm like, I think that was an evil spirit on me, because I wasn't myself. Even my mom, when she would call me in the program, she would be like, "What's wrong, Lucy?" I'm like, "Nothing, Mom." But then after, when I left, she was like, "You just sound so different. Your cadence has changed. Everything about you has changed." And I think that was, the experiences that I had, unfortunately, was the universe's way of pushing me out. I had to get out of that situation. So in my heart at the time, I was devastated, because I'm like, what do I do now? I have all of this loan debt. I've made it this far. Where do I go now? It's all of those things. And I even hate to say this, but the thoughts of like the suicidal idea, all of those things creep in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm glad that I was able to close that door and be blessed with so many other opportunities.
Definitely. What has life looked like since then, stepping out of that?
I definitely have a lot more opportunities in the genomic space, the genetic space, different boards. And it probably came because I didn't have enough time to put into looking into all of this when I was in the program, and that when I stepped out, I put in the time to say, okay, I want to be on this board. I want to do this program. That opened up for me. I'm able to work with a lot more brands. I'm able to work with a lot more bigger corporations about making different changes. Again, I'm finishing my master's, and then I'm probably going to move and go somewhere special to work on this special board that I can't say right now.
Yeah.
But actually buying a house this year, something that I never would have thought to do
Wow.
You know, I probably would have waited until like years later when I paid my loans off. But a lot has definitely changed, more than I can even think of.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think like I'm just like so encouraged by like your faith to be able to step out in a place where like you knew something like in your heart and your spirit did not sit well.
Right.
You know, and then especially in the face of people that are to your face telling you that you don't belong here, like that's something else.
Yeah.
So what encouragement would you even give to like your peers or others that may be hearing this and thinking like, that's me? Like, what would you share?
Probably the same thing my mentor told me, because sometimes it takes someone else to tell it to you for you to actually just get it. And that is, do you need to be here to do what you need to do? Do you need to be in this particular place? Do you need to be here at this particular time? Because so often, and I've done this a lot in my life, where I'm like, I planned this out. I'm supposed to do this by this age. I'm supposed to do this by this time. We put so many restrictions on things that we confine ourselves in a space. We confine ourselves in a state or a situation. And then looking outside of the box is like, do you need to be there to get where you need to be? And I look at it as like, you have, this is a cheesy scenario, but you have Democrats and Republicans, and this is not political. It's just a scenario. You know, they say that both parties, they initially want the same thing. In the end, they just have different ways of doing it and going about it. And for me, it's looking at, if you want to get somewhere, how many ways can you get there? Do you have to go one way, or do you have 5 different ways? And for me, I had 6 or 10, but I was so stuck on, well, I've invested so much time in this place. I've moved here. I did this. It doesn't matter. The time that you spend thinking about how much time you've invested, you've already wasted that time, and you could have been going another route.
Right. It's the theory of sunk cost. It's like, it's done. It's done. Man, I'm so glad that you were able to like walk out of that and be in a healthier place, especially if like your friends and your peers and your family could like physically tell that you were lighter and brighter.
Right.
So you've already shared a little bit about this, but I would love to go back to ways that you see racism and discrimination manifest like at the bedside or in like Western medicine sphere.
Okay, so I've been able to experience it and watch others experience it in the form of Black women in childbirth or Black women experiencing pain. And I think my very first experience with that was when I went to be an advocate for my friend who had really bad pain in her arm.
Okay.
And we went to the hospital at like 2 or 3 in the morning. And the doctor, he was just very off-putting. They took her blood pressure with her clothes on, like a whole sweater on. And I'm like, how are you getting an accurate reading with her sweater?
Right.
And then when we went to see the actual doctor, he barely wanted to touch her. And she was in so much pain. We ended up finding out that she had cervical radiculopathy, which, if you know, it's like super painful. And he was like, well, we're not going to prescribe any opioids for this. And at that moment, I was reading a book, but I'm like, we didn't even come in here for opioids. We didn't ask you for any drug medication. You're the doctor. You're going to make that call anyways. But I felt like in that moment, it's like, okay, well, this is a Black woman coming in here complaining of pain, but we can't see anything. So it must be imaginary. What is the assumption? Well, she's probably drug seeking. And they do this a lot with Black people. They're coming in here for drugs. They're coming in here for drugs, And so she got the least invasive drug. They gave her a magnesium pill, some type of muscle relaxer, which her issue wasn't a muscle issue. It was a nerve issue. And so I saw that with her, and it started showing up more in other experiences. Like usually you're just in your box and you don't really see too much of this, but when you experience it once, then it's just there, it's there. And so I started learning about how Black women are treated in childbirth. And I'm sure you're aware of Black women. They have a mortality rate 4 times higher than that of their white counterparts when they give birth, because again, their pain is not.
Yep. And infant mortality rates are higher.
Yes. Their pain is not considered. And then, like I was saying earlier, I have peers where they're actual doctors and they'll go into a patient room and the patient's like, all right, okay, yeah, nurse.
What?
Can I see the doctor now? These are real experiences. And I've even experienced that when I've had on like scrubs. They're like, oh, what, do you want to be a nurse? I'm like, why is that the first thing like that comes into your mind? It's like Black and doctor can't coexist in some people's mind, and it's like why? And so I've always wondered, how do we even tackle this? Because it's not our problem, and it's not our problem to fix. It's the problem, right, and it's the presumptions of other people. So how do we tackle that? How do we fix that? And that's a question that I'm always asking myself. And do I want to be in a space where I'm constantly looked at as inadequate? And I even see this on social media. And I noticed this a while back, that the messages that I share or the posts that I share, they're more well received from my white counterparts, but not from me.
Interesting.
Very interesting, because I've had so many people steal my post, and it just happens to be that they're white, and it blows up way more than when I've said it, because it's almost like, oh, well, this information is coming from a white woman. It's coming from a white man. They must know more than the Black woman they stole it from. And so I've experienced that multiple times.
Yeah. How have you felt addressing that, or what has that looked like for you?
At first, I was like non-confrontational. I'm like, this is social media. But then it got to the point where people would literally go word from word for things that I was saying. And then they would take my post and take my name off of it with my little picture. And they would they would white it out. And the only way that I found out about this is that my followers were just sending me mass DMs. They were like, this is your post. This is your post. Yeah. Here's your logo.
Right.
And I've been blocked by many of these people, because it's like, why is it so hard to give credit when I go on in the comments and I'm just like, this is my post, just give me credit.
Yeah, sure.
And so I did get to the point where I'm just like, I can't be timid or non-confrontational to call this out, because this is my work. And people do need to know.
It's your intellectual property.
It's my intellectual property. And people do need to know that Black women are smart, like we're intelligent, and we do have a lot to offer, and we do share this information. And it's not right to just take it. And so I did start speaking out about it more. I did get some pushback where some people were like, why is this a white or a Black thing? And it's like, because it was made that way.
Right.
It's content colonization.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm just more liberated now when I speak on that. When I speak on anything, it's like I really don't care what you have to say or think about me calling someone out for stealing my property.
Right.
So
Yeah, I saw you post on that, I think a couple weeks ago, and I was just like baffled because I've heard about it from like other content creators that I follow that have talked about like even like lawsuits that they've processed for like stealing content. Which is like a whole other level that I didn't even realize, like people walk through.
Right.
But that's definitely super interesting in what you were saying of like, if this is like your intellectual property, it becomes a race thing when it changes the way that you're perceived by the wellness community as a Black creator.
Right. So yeah, that, and I've just started trying to take social media in bits and pieces, because the more you start looking into these things, the more that they're there. And so
I would love to circle back to like your experiences with your friend, or even talking about just like the discrepancies, I think, in women's healthcare in general. Can you just share a little bit more about how you've seen this like glaring disparity, and then especially more so for minorities when it comes to like women's access, perception of pain, like women like women already have harder issues getting treatments or, medical insurance.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you could speak a lot more to that.
Yeah, there was this book. It was a nursing book, and it was like I have it posted on my page, but there was a page in the book where it was talking about race pain or racial perception of pain. And it literally said verbatim, Black people don't feel pain. And so you take that and you teach it to all of these nurses, all of these physicians. It's not their fault that they don't know that we're in pain or they don't take it seriously, but it is their fault when they don't listen to the patient. What they were taught in that book, and it went through to like all different nationalities, ethnicities, about, oh, you don't need to do this for Muslims, or you don't need to do this for white people. And the one that really stuck out is like, Black people don't feel pain because when you go back in time, they get this from Black people working out in the heat during slavery.
What?
Our ancestors being in pain during slavery, or being out from the wee hours of the day just picking cotton. It was something that I read about it a long time ago about our nerve endings being more resilient. It's
I was literally
crap.
about to say, like, I don't think your pain receptors are like biologically different.
It's a bunch of crap, and like when I was reading it, and it was like, this is what physicians, we've surveyed a bunch of physicians, and this is how they feel like Black people assess pain. It was like, who are these physicians, and why are they physicians?
Yeah. Like, how did they get here?
How did they get
and what
here?
Are they teaching people?
And then it tied back to the opioids, because there is an actual study on Black people, the assessment of Black people not feeling pain and how physicians respond to that. And so when we do come in and where we are saying, oh, I'm in pain, but they can't see this because they haven't done any imaging, or they haven't done any assessments, and we say we are in pain, they go back to that opioids. But then that study showed that Black people are the least likely to get prescribed opioids, and they're the least likely to stay on opioids. So then you get that, and it's like, where are we getting this information of Black people don't feel pain? But then where are we getting this information of Black people are drug seeking? Because the research does not show that. So I used to volunteer for a women's clinic, food shelter, and just helping them get access to healthcare, which the area that I was in was all Black. It was predominantly Black. It was really hard. And I do feel like, the battle of the food deserts that Black people are already placed in, and then the lower income areas, healthcare should not be as difficult as it is. And then when you go into that hospital saying, I'm in pain, and they don't take you seriously, it infuriates me, more than I can even describe.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've seen Black women die at the bedside because a doctor didn't take their pain seriously. We've seen this with Black mothers giving birth and how they've died from hemorrhages because the doctors didn't take their pain seriously. And that was one of the things that that drove me into medicine too, was that I wanted to be a Black doctor that listened to my Black patients, because they needed. Studies show that they needed somebody. And studies show that when Black patients have a Black doctor, their outcomes are a lot better than
really. Yeah.
Even if Black men, we already know that men barely go to the doctor, but Black men are more likely to go to the doctor when they have a Black doctor. And so if we don't have enough people of color going into medicine to represent us, then it's just a suicide mission, you know? And so I think that's what drove me to keep going, even with what I experienced, is that my people, my community, they need us.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like a systematic issue when, like you said, your process to even get fully to the bedside is thwarted because of the way that people perceive people of color, even walking in the door, to be able to get to that space.
And then I just think back, and I really don't even follow like all the celebrity drama, but I just remember seeing the Megan Thee Stallion video where she had blood dripping from her feet, and they were just still telling her to walk back and walk back and walk back. And I'm like, this woman's probably in pain. But because she was probably perceived as a threat before she was perceived as a woman, and they saw a bunch of Black individuals, just keep walking. She had a bullet in her foot. Just keep walking back. Just keep walking back. Our pain is just constantly invalidated. And I even think about this in my situation. My situation was painful. And I know that anybody that's like me, that went through what I went through, that situation alone is painful. It doesn't have to be like a physical assault. It's a mental assault.
Right.
And that's painful.
It's emotional. It's the weight of walking into your office, not knowing what patients are going to even be able to work with you that day.
That all of that is painful, and it's invalidated. And so you can just tie in those together, the invalidation of pain as a medical student, and then being invalidated with your pain as a Black woman going to go seek care. It's too much.
Absolutely. I'm working through this book right now, Unwell Woman by Eleanor Cleghorn. Super fascinating, but it really pissed me off because even in the first like 3 chapters, it's going through like the history of like women's healthcare in a man-made world. It's basically the premise. And it touches on different pockets for like different races and ethnicities. But it basically starts off by being like, yeah, Hippocrates came up with like this belief around women's bodies behind the Hippocratic Oath. And long story short, basically believed that if women were not pregnant or actively having sex, their uteruses would float to the top of their bodies and suffocate them.
What?
Womb suffocation was the way that, like Greek women.
My gosh.
Were treated for. And that's just like one of the things that they come up with. And I'm like, this man was like the hallmark, and I'm not anywhere in the medical field, but I think of like, the Hippocratic Oath, right? Like to do no harm. And this man's telling that any female symptom, whether it's pain, emotion, nausea, anything, tremors, whatever he was encountering, was due to the uterus because they didn't know anything. And any symptom was attributed to the uterus and it's poisonous, blah, blah, blah. But all of us were dying by womb suffocation. So the way to treat it is have sex, have babies, because the baby will weigh down the womb so it can't float up to the top to kill you.
Wow. A lot of that is still very prevalent about women in general just not experiencing pain. Like we see this when women go get IUDs. They literally said it hurts. Like it hurts. And there's still no anesthesia. But if it was a man, it felt like a little pinch. Oh, let's give him anesthesia. And then I just thinking back to like the history of birth, like the drugs they used to give, how they used to tie women down, that's crazy to me. Womb suffocation.
Yeah. There was like this line that said, the womb wants what the womb wants. They treated it as a like actual animal that needed to be fed and like controlled because it was the innate like biology of women to be demonic.
Wow.
I think you would love it.
That reminds me
I'll tag it in the show notes.
The Handmaid's
It's something else. Yes.
Wow. Yeah, I'll definitely have to read that. Have you ever read Medical Apartheid? No. So it's a really great book, and how you were just talking about womb suffocation, it just clicked into my mind. There's a part in the book where she was explaining how Black people are treated to white standards, how we're tested to white standards. Right. And this is something that I've also been diving in deeply for the past couple of months. It's like all of our laboratory testing. And I remember going to this seminar, and this man was like, when you do lab testing, you know, you have suboptimal, optimal, just up there. Sure, right. Like, or in range. Like doctors will say, oh, you're in range, but we want optimal. I think I was like, when they do those surveys, they're getting the information from the people who are the sickest. And those are the people that are going in to get their blood work done. You know, the healthy individuals, they're not going in there. And so I thought back to my first year in medical school when I wrote my paper on the bone difference in Black bones and white bones. And I remember coming up to read about vitamin D. And how the vitamin D test is different. The lab tests are different for Black individuals. And it just reminded me because my friend, she showed me her test, and she had, I think her vitamin D was like a 19. And if you read the standards now for Black individuals, the in range is like 20. And so anything below that is probably going to be like, bad, or you need to move it up or whatever. But they tell us that we need to have 30. Genetically, we have different binding receptors that causes our vitamin D to still be at a high usage rate of that of our white counterparts. But because the labs will look at this and compare it to white standards, Black individuals are being treated as that they are vitamin D deficient, and they're getting prescribed more vitamin D and more vitamin D. I even had a friend who was at like 26, and they were like, you're deficient. And I'm like, the standards don't say that for us. Yeah. And so they were like, we're going to prescribe you 10,000 IU. And she had talked to me about it. And I'm like, I don't think you need that, because that compared to some of our levels that I've seen, you're like high up there. And so even that in medicine, it has a long way to go, because they've tested on us for all of these years. They tested on Black bodies for all of these years. Unethically, they're still doing it, but they don't have any radical evidence for anything. And it just amazes me. You've been testing on us for years, and you don't have our labs right. Yeah, and the standards still being compared to the white male. You don't have our labs right. The standards are still being compared to the white male, but you've been testing on Black bodies for all these years. Yeah. Make it make sense. Help me help you, please. Help me help my community. Right. Goodness. So yeah, that I definitely, the book is really good. Yeah. What are some of the other things, like you said, I'm thinking standard wise, I didn't even know that about vitamin D. So I'm thinking like skin disease manifestations, like what are some of the other things that pop up? Yeah, so there's a form of melanoma that actually pops up differently, and some people like disregard it because it pops up differently. So I want to say it's called acrolentigenous melanoma, and it shows up as moles or like black fingertips, or black toes in black individuals. So it doesn't show up like the standard melanoma, like a spot on their back. And so sometimes it's missed. And there's a girl on TikTok, she brought awareness to it because she got diagnosed with skin cancer. It was a mole on her foot. She had been ignoring it until she started following the ABCDEs, where it's like, this is showing you the progression of the cancer.
Okay.
And she was just telling people to check their foot, because when you look at it, a lot of Black individuals do have dark fingernail beds. And so you would have never guessed that may be the melanoma, but because it goes undiagnosed, it's the most lethal type of cancer. And Black people have a higher mortality of this melanoma because it's lately diagnosed.
Yeah, because the standard is not even taking into account the fact that this can manifest different for people of different ethnicities, period.
And that's the same with a lot of skin diseases. I've seen this with lupus. Like, Black individuals don't always come in with the butterfly rash, or even with Lyme disease, they don't always come in with the bullseye rash. And so there was this medical student, he was creating a book of skin diseases in Black patients because they were getting misdiagnosed. Because whenever you go on Google and you type in Lyme disease, you see a bullseye rash on every skin tone except of a Black person's body. And so he was like, this needs to be changed because these diseases are getting diagnosed too late, or it's just negligence because you don't know how to look at a Black body. And I even noticed this in school in our practicals where, like, even the verbiage, it would say purple stretch marks, red stretch marks. You're not going to see red stretch marks on a darker skin tone. You're not going to see purple stretch marks on a darker skin tone. It's the verbiage and the lack of the pictures and on Black bodies. And so he created that book. I'm not sure if it's released yet, but I want to say it's called Brown Skin Matters. He has an Instagram page. It's really amazing.
Was this even a conversation like in school, or were you like looking at your peers and being like, I'm thinking of that meme of like the white monkey that's like sitting in the chair and he's just like, I don't understand.
It honestly wasn't. Even when I wrote my first paper on like the bone differences in Black and white individuals, like the difference of the radius or the difference of the femur, my professor was shocked. He was like, I didn't know this. Even when I told him about the vitamin D, he was like, I didn't know this. And this to me infuriated me because I'm like, I'm going to school to learn about how to treat all people, but except the Black person, the Black body. So who am I treating? I'm giving these standards and they're based off of, like you said, the white male. Why am I here? And so I did have to do a lot of research on my own to understand, the genetic differences, the skin differences, the bone differences, the disease manifestations. And one of the things that I'm working on now that I hope when I finish my master's, I can get like some funding for, or even just work with larger bodies, is like the genetic differences and diseases and how they manifest. And I was just talking to my friend about this, is that we see a lot of like very odd diseases in Caucasians or non-POCs. And then we see these diseases in Black people that exist because of their lifestyle factors. So like diabetes and heart disease and the cancers and the cholesterol and things like that. But then when you look on the other side of the spectrum, like you have all of these long named diseases that I've rarely seen in Black patients. Like even when I was volunteering I was a candy striper in high school and I was in day surgery, I would see the craziest names, Wilson's disease, all of these muscle diseases. And I'm like, why don't we see these in POCs? Like, why don't we see these in people of color? And so that's one thing that I've been really embarking on with my genetics.
Yeah, that's incredible, especially because the fact that, like you said, your professors that are teaching you to set you up, to set you out into the community to serve others doesn't even know
doesn't even know.
Period.
Doesn't even know.
Wow.
And I also feel like because we don't see all of these crazy diseases in people of color, they have to attack people of color elsewhere. And so, as we were talking before, food deserts, all of these chemicals in our hair products that are not even listed on the bottles, the pollution and the toxins in the water. And so, it's probably going to be a long time before I get to the bottom of this, but it's definitely one of the things that have sparked my interest.
Yeah. And I'm so thankful that you have a passion for this and that you definitely will be a voice in this space. Huge.
Well, thank you.
I'm pumped, man. When you finish school, I'll be your biggest supporter.
Oh, thank you.
So as we move towards wrapping up, where can our community connect with you? I know you're still in the midst of like all the things school, but are there any services or things that you're thinking about? Products, you mentioned skincare. Where can our community get in contact with you?
So my Instagram is natural Natosha. So NATRUAL_NATOSHA. I always have to put an emphasis on the O because people are like, Natosha? And I'm like, Natasha.
No, Natasha.
Natasha. So that's my Instagram and TikTok. And then my skincare page is linked to my Instagram. It's Naturology skincare.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's so cool. I didn't even know you had a skincare page. Like, what?
Well, I started in 2017, and it's so crazy that my lifestyle now kind of is resembling my 2017 era. Like when I was in Raleigh, I had started my skincare line, and I was working for the state, and I feel like I was like really happy at that time. Just relaunched last year in May with Regenesis, which is like an all-encompassing hair serum. And so I just relaunched with that, and I'm just slowly adding in products because I'm going through the process of testing them, which is a lot more.
That's a whole process.
It's a whole process. Like people, like when I first started my business, I was not sending my samples off to like a lab. I just knew like the chemistry of it. I'm like, okay, this preservative, I can test it here. Now it's like I'm doing a whole extensive process. I'm sending it off to a lab. They're testing, eat 3 batches in a row, this and that, and so I'm introducing them like piece and piece and piece.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm super excited though. Man, all the science comes out in the coolest of ways.
In the coolest of ways. And that's why I'm saying chemistry is like foundational because plant chemistry is it just get nerded out. It's just geeky.
Well, do you have any other resources off the top of your head that you can think of to share? I have medical apartheid on here, and I'll link some of the other stuff.
There is an app, and well, they may not be an app now. I think they're a website now. It's called The Hue. The Hue and Her. It helps you connect to Black doctors.
Oh, that's awesome. Sweet.
And I know they were thinking about, I know they were thinking about making it an app back then. But that one's a really great one.
For sure. Well, I have one more closing question for you that we wrap up with all of our guests. And you've already shared so much. So I'm really curious about how you feel answering this last question. So if you could provide any wisdom to your younger self or our community that is listening, what would you share?
Ooh, I would say the biggest piece of wisdom is, for me, don't put a time or an age on anything, because your life can change in a second, and that can change that time, that age restriction that you placed on it, and devastate you. And I think that's where a lot of our stress comes from. I also did a post about this where I'm like, we have to stop tying our accomplishments to age. Oh, I need to have this accomplished by 23. I need to have this accomplished by 24. I need to have this. Look at Sally. She did this by 23. Look at John. He did this by 24. That causes so much societal pressure. And then you're looking at yourself and you're like, well, why am I not that far ahead? It wasn't meant for you to be right there. You are meant to be exactly where you are, because if you were supposed to be anywhere else, you would be there. And if you keep putting those age and those restrictions, you're not going to be anywhere, because you're going to keep thinking, okay, well, now I just got to start here. I got to start here. So that would be my biggest advice, because I've done it so many times. I put an age restriction. I'm like, okay, I need to graduate. I even graduated undergrad early because I put that age restriction on. I graduated in 3 years because I'm like, I need to have this done by this and this done by this, because of that age restriction. And I'm still exactly where I'm at, where I would have been if I didn't graduate early.
Yeah, definitely. That was so beautiful and such a good reminder, I think, like you mentioned earlier with social media, just to protect our hearts in that.
Right.
Because especially in the wellness sphere, I think I like get caught in comparison myself, because I'm like, I only have this many followers compared to this many followers. And like, man, I just did this, this, and this. And like, my life looks nothing like I thought it would be. You know, I'm 25 and a mom to a 2-year-old when I thought I'd be nearly finishing my doctorate right now. But I'm seeing my friends that are at PT school doing this, this, and this. And I'm like, well, God, thank you for the fact that my life does not look like I thought it would. But man, I have to like protect my heart in the midst of that, because it can get all sorts of ugly.
Yeah, and people don't realize that when you're looking at other people's highlight reels, you don't know what they went through. Like, people see me and they're like, oh my gosh, you're so lucky. You don't know what I went through. You don't know how many times I thought about not being here. You don't know how many times I cried. And you know how many times I just wanted to just give it all. You don't know. And so that's why I've never had jealousy of anyone. I've never talked about anyone. Because I've always walked to the tune of my own beat, because I know exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I'm not in a rush. I'm not in a race with anyone. And so if I keep looking at what someone else is doing, oh, someone just bought a house, or someone just did this, I'm going to start living outside of my means, because I'm still trying to do what other people are doing. That's not for me at that time. It's not.
That's such an awesome reminder. Thank you so much, Natosha, for this amazing conversation.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this was absolutely incredible. And I will link all of your content and all of the things that you recommended, because, man, I can't wait to dive into that book.
Yes, it's really good.
I'll send you the other one, because I'm only a couple chapters in and I'm getting wrecked. Super fascinating.
Killing the Black Body is also a really great one. It's about the start in the unethical testing of birth control on Black bodies.
Oh no, birth control is a whole other conversation.
Birth control is a whole other conversation. So
we'll
that
have
one's
to have
really
that
good.
Conversation.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Natosha. This was truly a gift, and I can't wait to share it with everybody. So we will catch you guys on the next episode.
Well, thank you.
This episode of If Only I Were Wiser has ended, but be sure to subscribe for more episodes so you don't miss any encouragement. And don't forget to rate and review, so we can continue to build our community and share more about topics that will be healing and helpful for you. See you in the next episode.